Hey everybody, welcome to this training. I am excited to talk about behavior with you because it's one of my favorite things to talk about. It's a lot of fun, and even though it doesn't necessarily feel like it when you have a child who is doing a behavior, it's really kind of a fun challenge to help kids out with that. So I love this. We only have 30 short minutes, so we're going to go ahead and get started. To give you a quick background on me and on my experiences with behavior, I have been a stepmom to two girls for the last 11 years, and I have been a school psychologist for 7 years. In that time, I've seen almost every possible behavior, and I've learned to shape different behaviors, including separation anxiety, physical aggression, like hitting, kicking, biting, turning over desks, clearing the room, punching people, non-compliance, which is just not complying with requests, lying, meltdowns for kids who have autism or other disabilities, masturbation for kids with intellectual disabilities, and more. You could say that I've seen it all. So in this behavior training, we're going to talk about what to do, what will help you, and how we can kind of proceed going forward. So the first thing to know is that all behavior is communication. Any behavior that a child engages in is communication. So if they don't do something, that's a communication. They're telling you that they don't want to do that. Maybe they don't have the words to tell you that, but that's what they're telling you. So with behavior and communication, sometimes you have to figure out what's happening. You have to figure out what is going on and how to best help it. Behavior is typically around three things. It's around getting something or escaping something. And when we get something, it can be something tangible, it can be something sensory, or it can be to control a situation. And those are major functions of behavior. So if your child is doing something, they're letting you know that they're trying to either get away from something or to get something that they want. So that's the first critical point in behavior. If you can figure out what your child is telling you, then you're going to do great. You're going to do awesome. The second one is to build a relationship with the child, and we're going to spend a little time on this one. In building relationships, you may feel like with your children or with your stepchildren, you have a decent relationship. You might feel like you do things together, that you can have a good time together, you can have fun. But if your child is engaging in a behavior that you don't necessarily love, something in your relationship needs to be increased to help them. So in my first semester, in my first class, I think on my first day of graduate school, I went to an interventions class, and the teacher emphasized the importance of behavior or of relationships with the child. So I want you to think for just a second. You might have had, growing up, a favorite teacher that you loved. And think about what that was like with that teacher. Think about your relationship with that teacher, because chances are if you loved the teacher, something in that teacher and your relationship with them was important to you and helpful to you. The chances are if you have a teacher that you remember and that you remember liking, you have a good relationship with them. Children don't do things for people they don't have a relationship with. I see this all the time in my self-contained support classroom for students who have emotional disturbances, which is code for they're super naughty. And when we first come in, the kids don't want to behave. They're aggressive. They don't listen. They don't do academic work. They have lots of behavioral problems. And so the teacher in there spends a lot of time when students first come into her class, building a good relationship with them. And that looks like positively reinforcing them, finding out what their interests are, helping them identify and use coping strategies when they get triggered, things like that. So it can help a lot to build a relationship with your child or with your stepchildren. That is number two. The number two most important thing to remember. The third one that I see all the time is adults who engage in power struggles. And to be honest, I do this a lot. My oldest stepdaughter, who I love dearly, is kind of messy because she's a teenager. And a lot of times I'll get in power struggles with her about cleaning her room, or about what time she needs to go to sleep, or about not using technology. And it's not healthy and it's not helpful. So avoiding power struggles is difficult because we are the adults. We know what's going to help our kids, and we want them to listen. We want them to follow what we have to say. And sometimes that doesn't happen, which can be really frustrating and hard. So in avoiding power struggles, there's some love and logic principles that come in, like giving your child two choices that you're okay with. So for example, with my stepdaughter, I could tell her, hey, I want you to clean your room. You can clean it now, or you can clean it when you're done watching this episode. I'm okay with either of those options. And it gives her power to choose, which makes her feel like she's in control of the situation. All of us want to feel like we're in control. And if we're out of control, a lot of times we do things that don't help us and that kind of hurt us, but help us feel like we have some control in a situation. So if you can avoid power struggles with your kids, that is a huge and important thing to avoid. The fourth thing we're going to talk about is teaching your child skills or replacement behaviors and consistently reinforcing them. If you have a child who has a negative behavior, maybe it's lying, you want to teach them what you want them to do instead. So if they're afraid that they're going to get in trouble, which is common for kids who lie, you can tell them something like, you'll get in less trouble if you're honest with me. Or I won't be mad at you for what you did because I'll be proud of you for telling the truth. So you want to teach them what that skill looks like. How does it look when they listen to you? How does it look when they tell the truth? What kinds of things can you structure and set in place for your kids to help them encourage that behavior? When you are teaching expectations, you have to be super explicit with kids. And sometimes that can be hard. But you almost have to model it in terms of you're thinking out loud everything that you say. So you're thinking, oh, okay, so Johnny just told me the truth about biting a kid at school. What I want to do, and what I would do if Johnny had lied to me about it, is give him a consequence for lying and give him a consequence for biting the other kid at school. But instead, because Johnny told me the truth, he's only going to have a consequence for biting the other student. So kids know explicitly what their expectations are, how you're reinforcing them or consequencing them, and what you're doing to help them. Kids need to know. A lot of times we expect them to read our minds, and that doesn't help. It doesn't help at all. So we have to teach skills. The second part of number 4 is to consistently reinforce skills. If you are a step parent, this can be a little bit more tricky because the kids aren't at your house all the time, and they likely have 2 sets of expectations that they have to follow, one at their mom's house and one at their dad's house. So it can be a little bit harder when you're a step parent, but it is possible. And over time, when you consistently teach and reinforce expectations, kids know the rules. They learn them. Kids are smart. They can pick up on things, so they'll learn it, even if they're only at your house part of the time. If they are with you all the time, it can be hard to consistently reinforce things because your mental load and your exhaustion from dealing with kids all the time can overwhelm you and make it hard for you to be consistent. My recommendation for parents is always that if you can't be consistent with making a behavior change, don't do it. It's not worth your time and energy, and it'll set you and your child up for more difficult and negative behaviors. So consistency looks like you ask them to do the skill for a certain amount of time. Maybe you start out twice a day for 15 minutes. You want them to do whatever you're asking them to do. And then you slowly increase that over time, but you reinforce it every single time. And you pick a predetermined list of reinforcements. So what does your child want to work for? Maybe it's time on technology. That one's really common for a lot of kids. They love technology. They love their iPads. They love having time on that to play and to have downtime. And a lot of kids report that it helps them de-stress and decompress. So whatever it is, you're going to pick the consequences for that. And consequences are reinforcements. Consequences we tend to think of as negative, but they can also be positive. So you can have positive consequences. For example, if you pick up your room for 15 minutes, then your positive consequence is that you can have 5 minutes to spend on your iPad doing what you like to do. So you can pick those, and it's better if you pick them ahead of time and do it with the child. If you're struggling with what consequences or reinforcements to give your child, look at what they're getting naturally. Maybe they're already spending time on their phone watching Netflix. So instead of having them just get that, make them earn that. And you will notice that their behaviors will improve and increase the more that you constantly reinforce them for what they're doing. Reinforcements don't have to be expensive. They can be something like time with a parent that they love. It can be small things. When my stepdaughter was struggling with massive separation anxiety, and this was to the point where we would pick her up and she would scream and cry and try to clutch onto her mom and grab onto her because she didn't want to leave. We put in place what's called a token economy. And a token economy is really easy. You find something free that you can give the kid that they can trade in for something else. So it might be like lots of people do things like warm fuzzies in a jar, or tickets, the ones that you can get from the carnival. And a token economy is easy because you set it up ahead of time and say, okay, when you get 3 tickets, this is what you get. When you get 5 tickets, this is what you get. And you can go up to as many tickets as you want. But it works because the kids are getting those tickets and those are reinforcing. They know that they're going to be able to trade them in for a prize later. Behavior is all about consistency and expectations. So when you teach expectations of what you want your child or children to do, and then you reinforce them for that, they will do what you want them to do for the most part. There are a couple of caveats. If they are struggling emotionally, like if they have a disability, if they have a mood disorder, if they have oppositional defiant disorder, this can be a little bit trickier and sometimes you have to think outside the box. But if you are struggling, you can always reach out and ask me for help, or you can ask someone at your school for help, or someone else that you know that is having a hard time. I love talking about behavior. It's so fun because you have to get creative and problem solve. And there are things with behavior that you come across that you don't see in any other area. So it's exciting. The next thing with behavior, once you teach and consistently reinforce it, is to take the emotions out of it. So emotions can be really difficult as a parent because you might feel like your child is struggling on purpose, or that they're just being a little turkey, or that they are being manipulative, or that they are, there's so many things people feel like that they're not complying on purpose. Trying to understand your child and help your child understand themselves will help you with their behavior, because children aren't usually naughty on purpose. They are taught and reinforced to be naughty by their environment, or sometimes by their brain chemistry. And I say that for kids because some kids who I've seen in the schools who have been born drug addicted have a really hard time understanding how the consequences of their behavior connect to their behavior. And when even through teaching and teaching and teaching, they still struggle with that. But if you don't have a drug addicted baby or child, then it's easier to teach them these things. And I think most of the people that I know have pretty neurotypical children, which just means their brains are typical average. They don't have ADHD, they don't have autism, they weren't born drug addicted, things like that. And those kids, honestly, these neurotypical kids are the easiest ones to work with their behaviors. So it's awesome. It's a good thing. The next part, when you can take your emotions out of parenting, you just have to become like a robot. And I learned this first from my mom because she had a child who had a substance abuse addiction, and it was extremely emotional for her. And she was worried every night that her son was going to come home and that he was going to be dead. Not come home and be dead. That doesn't make sense. But he was going to die from the drug addiction, and he would try to get money from them and try to get things from them, and she just had to disengage. And I've learned this since with parents, because kids will up the ante. There's a thing called the escalation cycle, and it's in a book that's really good called Tough Kids. And they have a Tough Kids parenting book and one for teachers. And if you can find it at your library, check it out, or buy it on Amazon. It's worth it. It's really good. So this robot parenting teaches you basically that when your child escalates, instead of you escalating right along with them, you stay calm. When they become upset, you lower your voice a little bit. You talk slower, which helps them calm down. And it's hard to do that when we're escalated. It is super hard to do that because we want our kids to listen, and we want them to behave, and we want them to follow our directions because, again, as parents, a lot of times we know what's best for them and we know what they need to learn to help them be successful. But kids don't know that. So we have to help and manage our emotions to help us stay calm. We can do that, like I said, by taking deep breaths is a huge one. Like I said, with talking slow and lowering your voice tone. A lot of times another thing that helps is kind of turning your body away from your kids so they don't feel like all your energy is directed right at them and you're lecturing them or you're preaching them. Kids hate it, especially teenagers hate it when you lecture them. So keep it short and sweet where possible. With behavior, there are always things that predict it, things that happen right before the behavior happens. And when I have to write behavior plans in school, we do observations of the student for 2 weeks to see what happened right before the behavior. So for example, one of my students who has autism the other day, she has it. The other day she flipped over a desk when she got upset. And she hasn't done that for a long time. And so in talking with her, I was trying to figure out what upset her. And her trigger or the antecedent event to her behavior was that she was trying to communicate with an aide that she didn't know, and she didn't feel like the aide was listening to her. And so that escalated her, brought her behaviors up here, and then she got frustrated and flipped over the desk. And that happens a lot. So if there's a behavior that your child is doing, figure out what happens right before the behavior and set it up. There are millions of charts online on Pinterest on different places that you can do what's called an ABC form. And that stands for antecedent, behavior, and consequence. The antecedent always precedes the behavior, and the consequence always follows the behavior, and it reinforces the behavior. So most of the time, kids are getting consequences naturally in their environment. And when they have those consequences naturally, it helps maintain the behavior. So like we talked about at the start, some of the behaviors are maintained by sensory things. For kids with autism, they might run away because it's too noisy for them, or the lights are too bright, or they hate their teacher's voice. And running away gives them the consequence that they escape whatever is irritating or overwhelming them sensorily. So that's naturally reinforcing. And you have to find something to do in its place that is also naturally reinforcing. If a child is trying to escape a situation, you teach them how to escape it appropriately and in ways that are healthy and helpful for them. Behavior is not complicated in terms of how do you address it. It's complicated at first because you don't necessarily know what's happening. And if you have questions, I want to offer to you a free 30-minute call that you and I can talk about a behavior or two that your child is doing and come up with a system or a plan to address it. And this is awesome. Behavior plans take forever. I want to let you know how valuable that is. I do them for free in the schools because that's my job. But behavior plans typically take between 2 and 3 hours to address. But in a 30-minute call, we can ask questions and then follow up and see how things are going so that you can figure out why your child's doing this behavior and what's maintaining it and what you want them to do instead. So if you want them to stop lying, if you want them to stop hitting, if you want them to tell you how they're feeling instead of throwing something across the room, then we can talk about how you teach that behavior and how you reinforce that behavior. I forgot my water. And when I talk a lot, I have to drink lots of water. Hey, didn't really help. Behavior, so I was saying it's not complicated, and it's just sometimes figuring out what is happening and why it's happening, and then a way that you're socially okay with, a socially appropriate way for them to address that behavior and to change that behavior. So just kind of to review the things, all behavior is communication. Your child is trying to let you know something when they're misbehaving. It might be that they're tired. It might be that they had a bad day at school and that their friend was mean to them. It might be that they are overwhelmed and they can't handle what's happening in their situation or environment. My husband is the best, y'all. He just brought me a cup of water. Okay, so all behavior is communication. Your child is trying to tell you something that they don't have the words for or don't have the emotional capacity for. Second is to build a relationship with the child or improve your relationship with the child. And if you have been involved in the escalation cycle at all with them, there's a chance that you and your child have some negative feelings towards each other. Third is to avoid power struggles. And then fourth is to teach skills and consistently reinforce them. I know I talked about a couple other things as well that I didn't list on my list before I came here and talked to you about this, but behavior is really fun. So I like to talk about it with people. If anybody has questions, feel free to type them into the group chat. I tend to talk fast and I'm working on slowing down, but if you have questions or comments, or there's something that you can think of off the top of your head that your child is struggling with, feel free to let me know. I'm going to give you a couple more tips in the meantime. The next one is, and I talked about this briefly, that when you have consistent expectations at your house, then the children will live up to those expectations. They might struggle if you have more than, say, 3 to 5 house rules. So kids just get overwhelmed easily and it's too much for them to remember. So have 3 to 5 rules, and you want them to be general-ish, and you want them to be framed positively. In psychology, we call it the dead man's rule. It can't be something that a dead man can do. So instead of telling them, don't talk, you would tell them, please talk quietly, or use your inside voice. Instead of telling them, don't hit your sister, you would say, use soft hands. So that's examples of framing it positively. And then you want it to be general-ish. So it might be things like, use kind words if they're yelling, or if they're arguing, or if they're swearing, or calling each other mean names. One of your house rules might be to use 5 words. You don't want to have any more than 3 to 5. My husband has 2 that he's had set up since we got married. The first one is listen, and the second one is have fun. And if you ask our daughters what the 2 rules are in our house, they would say listen and have fun. I would love to add a third one onto that, and I am going to work on that, which is pick up after yourself. So those are the 3 house rules that we would have in our house. And if you have any examples of rules in your house, I would love to hear them, or what works for your kids. Positively framed, general, and not something that you just passively can do. You want it to be something that they actively have to try to do. And again, consistently reinforce those rules when they're followed. If you can talk to your kids about this and teach them a little more about how to do this, then they'll be set up, they'll be good, because kids learn quickly and they love reinforcements. I have a reinforcement list that I'm planning to share with some of the people on this call later. So that will give you ideas about things that kids can work for. And it might be something sensory, it might be something escape, it might be something attention. That's the one I forgot earlier, attention. Kids do a lot of things for attention, and they don't care if it's negative attention or positive attention as long as they're getting attention. So with the antecedent that we talked about earlier, if you can find a way to give your child more attention or a different kind of attention, or say, hey, right now I'm going to spend some one-on-one time with you, and this is just going to be you and me, so you can have as much attention as you want without calling them out on attention seeking, then they will do good. They will do a lot better and benefit from that. All right, so this has been kind of a brief overview of behavior. There's so much that goes into behavior and so many other things that we talk about with behavior. I teach a class on Thursday nights in the Jordan School District for parents of kids with autism spectrum disorders. And one of the weeks we focus on behavior. It's really cool because we can talk about lots of behaviors that kids do and figure out what the reason is for them and talk about solutions to that. So that has been another thing that's helped me grow my experience with kids and learn more about behaviors and what to do with behaviors. But I'm going to see if I can just pull this up really quick, just a second. Sorry, I downloaded it and I don't know for sure where it went, and I need to find the way to screen share really quick. Okay, so with behavior, I'm going to be doing a 4-week training on behavior, and it's going to be awesome. And we're going to be able to drill in and see what your child is struggling with. We're going to be able to figure out what the purpose of their behavior is. We're going to figure out what kinds of reinforcements are helpful for them. And we're going to figure out how you can consistently reinforce them over time. So I'm really excited about this. It's going to start Monday, February 4th, and it's going to be 4 weeks at 7 p.m. I'm recording this training and some of you are going to watch it later. I'm going to send it out. So for anyone who is currently on this training, with the exception of my husband, because he gets this for free, I want to offer you a special price on the training. It's going to be $77 for anybody who's on this call right now. For anybody who couldn't tune in and who wants to watch the replay, it's going to be $87 for you. And then lastly, for anybody who is not on the replay, but just maybe sees this posting later, it's going to be $97. So my special price for you guys for a half hour of your time on a Saturday, which I know is precious, is $77. And I'm going to post that on my wall and on my Facebook page. It's Sarah Susoff, just the same page. I'm going to see if I can figure out how to screen share really quick. I'm not a Zoom pro, so I'm just going to see if I can show this to you guys. And if not, I'll just post it along with the link, which will be fine. Okay, so hold on just a second. I'm not seeing it right now, so I'll just post it later. So with this training, super valuable, lots of good information. We're going to delve a lot deeper into what we talked about today and also offer you, not consistent, but like individual support for your children and what's happening with your children. So that is it for today, you guys. Thank you for your time. I really appreciate it. I'll be sharing this later. If you have any questions, please feel free to message me on Facebook, or you can send me an email. My email is sarah_susov@yahoo.com. Or you can send me a text. So just send me a message if you want to do that. Again, I appreciate your time. I know that it is valuable and that you have a lot going on Saturdays. And I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day. I love you all.